We can be found on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Like, share, subscribe, and leave us a comment down below. Now, on with the show.
We'll do it live. Fucking thing. We'll do it live. Fuck it.
Death Holler is a horror cast created by two true horror fans to bring to the table your favorite horror films. Topics include, but are not limited to, historical horror, gore, the occult, and terror. Listener discretion is advised.
I did like the scene that fought, or the next scene is one of my other scenes that I really liked in this film was whenever Father Brennan actually met up with Mr. Thorne, and they actually have the scene about where he's like he directs him to go to Megiddo and meet up with Bugenhagen, which is a hilarious name to me for some reason, but but. I like the scene that follows that. I mean, their meeting was cool, but I like the scene that follows that because they had this big storm just blow up out of nowhere in the film, and it gets dark and the wind blowing, and then Patrick Troughton he's trying to make his way into the church before whatever there's lightning striking all around him, and it's. I don't know that I like the ending as much whenever the actual piece off the steeple comes down and, falls through him. There's a little quick cut that they do there where he kind of just slumps over it's a little goofy when you rewatch it, but I like everything leading up to that. I think it's a good mood piece, in the film. And, I appreciate them, how, the way they set that up.
I mean, for the time era, it honestly was a pretty cool death, The lorist in me, the lore whore in me was like, that's hallowed ground. The devil can't touch that, But at the same time, it just worked out. In my opinion, it worked out pretty good. I thought the goofy slump was actually, I didn't think it was bad. I mean, yes, it looks goofy. I will agree with you on that. But I thought it looked real. It wasn't one of those, oh, I'm dying.
Well,
he literally just.
There's a fine balance there. Yeah, I agree with you. They could have, like him, they could have drug it out and it would have turned comical in its own right if they'd done that. The slump itself, I don't know, is a little too quick. I don't know. It's fine for what it is. They cut off of it quick enough to where it doesn't linger. It's just, I went back and rewatched this thing a couple of times, just kind of, get the timeline right and all that. When that scene pops up, I'm just like, if you see it too many times in a row, that's whenever it really starts
true.
Playing on you.
To me, it was like a critical hit. I mean, it immediately got him. The one thing I did not like, I will tell you, I did not appreciate the Austin Powers, no, where he's screaming no forever, but not moving. And he knows this thing's flying at him from I don't know, no, that's not even 30 feet, maybe 45 to 60 feet above him. And he's just standing there no. And just lets it hit him like that character in Austin Powers let the steamroller just go over him.
Oh yeah, that is more like Austin Powers. I was thinking in my head it's kind of like episode 3 Darth Vader, just screaming because Padme's passed away, but it's but yeah. But it's more of a better fit whenever you're talking about the fact this character's getting ready to die and they just won't move. And even in that movie, Austin Powers is like, "Get out of the way!" and he just keeps screaming, "No,
no!"
The little bit of behind the scenes on this that's kind of interesting is that that was a piece of balsa wood that they filmed, falling down, and they had it on a rail, but they had it so close to the actor that well, first of all, the producer, Harvey Bernard, he did it first, and just to see that it would work, and then before they put, Patrick in place, and it was so close to where they were standing on their mark that both of them, left the shoot, super anxious, because it came that close to really, in real life, hitting them. I mean, it was that tight of a fit that they felt like they were going to get hit by it, and that's, I don't know, that would take a lot of trust in your, workers or whatever, that whenever you got something coming directly at you and it's that tight of a, angle anyways.
Yeah, because you got to remember, folks, they didn't have CG back then. And maybe some bullshit CG, but nothing that could imitate what they filmed.
No, and they had to get it, as close to to where it looked legit as possible. And I heard that, and I was trying to think of standing there, as an actor, of course, doing the no scream, but then have this thing like literally just, slam right beside of you. Like so close that it gave the producer kind of a, a little anxiety attack when he tried it out himself.
I don't fucking blame him.
I don't blame him either. The scene after that I really like is, again, it's what makes the movie for me is when Jennings and Gregory Peck's character Thorne actually meet up for the first time legit, and that's whenever Jennings is going over the lore with him. He's showing him the photographs of where Father Brennan died, and the mark that showed was kind of was a foreshadowing of how he was going to die, and then of course the original nanny with the noose around her neck and the foreshadowing of that. And in that whole scene where they go into the apartment of Father Brennan's, and it's like just plastered, like floor to ceiling with these pages from the Bible. I like that whole scene. I like the interaction between the two actors. I like the lore they establish in those scenes. They're setting up a lot of information from Revelation and that sort of thing. And that a little bit behind the scenes on that, David Seltzer said that they would have never got that kind of detail in that apartment as far as like the design from like an American studio. He said that it was just one of those things where he wrote it into the script, and the British, since they were filming in Britain, and they just looked at it and said, okay, if that's what you want. And they painstakingly went through there and put those Bible pages one by one on the walls. So I thought it was a neat, part of the film. It gives the film the for us lore whores, the part, it's kind of, feeds that, into the movie.
Yeah, I liked it. Everything in that room just gave off really not creepy vibes, but that priest was trying to protect himself, which is exactly what they were trying to do. And then the fact that pretty much everything was left untouched because the police just thought that in the movie, the police thought that he was, crazy. So they just kind of left everything, and they allowed this random photographer to go in there, and he found all this evidence. But the evidence he had was like, it was really cool because it didn't seem super fake. You get these films where it's like, oh, right there's exactly what we're looking for. And this was, no, I had to do some digging. And when I looked under here, I found this, but this isn't the most damning thing I found. Look what else I found. Look at this news article. They set it up really well.
Well, and you mentioned that the police didn't find it, but the stuff that he finds only means it's only relevance to him and, and Gregory Peck's character, because it's the clipping of the astrological event that occurred 5 years before that, with the Star of Bethlehem reappearing over Rome the same day that Damien was born.
June 6th, that's 6 a.m. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. Why do they gotta hate on June babies?
Player haters.
Same thing with Rosemary's Baby. That's whenever the little baby was supposed to be born. So
because it is hot as hell, Reverend, in June. Okay.
Well, they gave it in Rosemary's Baby. They said that it was like the opposite time of the year whenever, Christ was born. So, which is, if you know anything about, the real history of it, that's false. Christ was probably born in like September or something like that. But that's a whole other
It was
argument.
Definitely warmer times. Yes.
Yeah. So anyways, but that's the logic they use in these films. So I guess it is what it is. It just sucks for us June babies to have to be, cast in the same, kind of situation. They made a mention that there's like 47 crosses on the wall or on the door leading into his apartment complex, and of course it's within direct eyesight of the church. I don't know if it's the church that he got killed at. I kind of got that feeling that it was, but I did
too. He said he had to be in view of his church, is what he said.
Yeah,
and I assumed it was the church. The one thing I didn't understand which will never really, I don't think there's any explanation, nor does there really need to be. But I didn't understand why he couldn't get into the church. Churches are usually always open, and this was like middle of the day.
Yeah, there's no explanation for that. And there's also, going back to what I was saying about the agency filled with a cabal of people, they have the reveal that Father Brennan had the mark of the beast on, and it was not just, it was not just a tattoo or some kind of thing he put there. It was actually a birthmark. So it was like Father Brennan himself was destined from birth to be the one that helped deliver the Antichrist into the politician's arms or something to that effect. It was like a predestination type thing.
Yeah.
And the last little bit that I liked on that is that it gives a reason why Jennings would be suddenly so interested in all this, is because, and they have this great little scene where he said, he's like, and just don't think that I'm crazy. He said, I've got a vested interest in this myself. He's like, whenever I was taking pictures of this originally, whenever the police first were, in here, he said, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in the mirror, and he shows, and it shows like his own death, like it,
Yeah.
so he's trying, his motivation, they established pretty well. It's not just he randomly sees these things and like, oh, I'm going to be the big hero. It's like, no, he's operating from a more realistic, like, I'm going to save my own ass because this is happening to me next, sort of situation. I really like that, as far as like the, them giving, a grounded reason why. Because in a lot of these movies, they just have the characters like, well, it's the right thing to do. It's like, no,
Exactly.
I mean...
No, he had, yes, I agree with you 100%. He had definite interest. It added, honestly, it was a little tiny, he didn't spend a lot of time explaining why he had interest. The picture was worth more than 1,000 words. And it kind of just really added to a storyline that kind of needed it at that point. Like, what is the purpose of this man? It gave his character complete purpose in just like 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was like a perfect little addition to, just fit him in there. And it's like, okay, that's fully believable. Next, keep these guys together. That's all I need,
Yeah.
They, the scene that they have now, there's several scenes that I like between them as they're like traveling, like, along the way, they go back to the hospital where it all happened. And along the way, Jennings is like reading off this, stuff that he found out in the Bible, which is actually the screenwriter putting himself into the film, because he's explaining the whole thing about the Antichrist will rise from the seas. The David Seltzer found when he was doing research for the film that, some theologians interpreted that to mean that the seas were like, like tumultuous, and that meant that like constant change, and the perfect thing that fit that was politics, because there's always some kind of, problems, conflicts going on. There's always change going on in politics. So they got it in their head that the Antichrist was rise in politics. And, that's why, and there's that literally, David Warner's character is, Jennings is putting that out there in the film as if he's, it's like, as Seltzer himself was like, oh, I found this cool thing. I'm going to, so this character is going to read it off in the film. But it's a cool little, thing to add into the lore that, a lot of people wouldn't have thought of. And then, of course, they add the stuff in about Wormwood and the star and all that as they're going along, and I like all that. And just like I said, I like the scenes where they're together, but one of my favorite scenes is whenever they go to the cemetery.
Yes.
Because first of all, it's got that dark setting. They really did a good job of setting up like this old, decrepit cemetery out in the middle of nowhere with this like ruined monastery or church or whatever is like, there's nothing else there but the old graves that have just fell, in decrepitude or whatever. And then they set up as they're even going into the scene, they set up what eventually happens to Gregory Peck, because they kind of focus in on those sharp spikes that are on the, the gate as they're going in there, and they're like, oh shit, what's going to happen with those? And then they add, and that I like that scene because it's got like this feel of like an old classic Hammer horror film, like whenever the Van Helsing and the protagonist go to fight or find the vampire, and they're like, that's usually the scenes how they set them up, and they're having to open up the crypts or whatever to get to them. It had that kind of vibe to it. I don't know if that, was something that Seltzer or, Donner directly was inspired by, but that's what it felt like to me. And I like
definitely a creepy goth vibe.
Yeah, and a lot of those older Hammer horror films had that going on for them. And even some of the films like from Italian directors like Mario Bava, in particular, Black Sabbath, I believe is the name of the film. It's got a lot of that stuff going on for it. But I like that, and I like they fully commit to that whole thing about Damien being born of a jackal, because I mean, whether you believe it or not, like whenever he goes to open up the the crypt or whatever that supposedly holds Damien's dead mother, it's like canine bones that are inside of it. I like that little throw
Yeah, it's like a
in.
dog humanoid type.
Yeah, and it's there's that, and then whenever he goes to, and it's such a quick scene, and Gregory Peck does just a fantastic job of just showing on his face the emotion. But when he opens up that next one, and it's his baby, his real baby, and there's that hole that's been like smashed into the side of the infant's head. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
And then you got the whole scene right after that. You have all that good stuff, but then you have the attack by the hellhounds. Basically, all the Rottweilers attack. And of course, we already talked about how they were just kind of dry humping in their each other, like
To give it a little lightness to it.
But they really, now to go back the darker side of it, they really, the stuntmen they had for David Warner and Gregory Peck, they actually had on the stuntmen leather and steel armor on these guys to protect them when the dogs actually did attack. And even with that on there, and I don't know if you want to label this as part of the curse, because we'll get into that, that's a whole debate on this, but one of the dogs that was attacking David Warner's stuntman actually bit through both leather and steel somehow
Oh, shit.
into the guy's leg, and the guy ended up having to have 14 stitches as a result of it. So, I mean...
Oh, my God. And I can't imagine that. Okay, if his teeth punctured the steel, and the steel then in turn punctured and cut his leg, fucking ow.
Yeah, it would have been a bad day for that stunt person. So, I mean, it's...
That's why you get paid the big bucks, sir. Just kidding.
And then, of course, they go back and they pay off the zooming in on the spikes, because whenever, Gregory Peck's character, Thorne, is trying to get out of there, of course, he, impales his arm on one of those things. So, overall, I feel like it's one of those scenes in the movie that was the creepiest. It had those old school vibes to it, but it also had more menace than some of the rest of the movie, I felt did. It beats the hell out of that scene where Lee Remick's falling and she does that little half Peter Pan twist and falls on the floor. I mean, it's, way better than that.
We'll call that the side sleeper.
I like that. I've already discussed it, but to contrast her fall from the hospital versus that one from earlier, it's night and day. That one from the hospital actually sells how dangerous, Mrs. Baylock is. Whenever you see Lee Remick just falling from, so high up. And of course she does the thing again where it's her mesmerizing eyes. So you don't know if she pushed Lee Remick out of the window or if she convinced Lee Remick to do it herself. It's kind of left ambiguous in the film as to that.
I mean, if you think about it, now that you bring that up, I mean, Lee, she had some psycho issues after dealing with thinking that her quotation mark son is the devil. She begged her husband not to allow him to kill her, which technically he didn't, but then she's in the hospital kind of just lingering in these thoughts all day. She lost a baby, which a baby she kind of didn't want to have after technically having a hellion of a child already.
Which they
was messed up.
They established, though, through the psychologist or doctor or whatever that she'd been seeing, that she didn't trust that Damien was her son, and she thought he was also like evil or something. So there was that. She had that.
Yeah, she thought he was otherworldly. So, I mean, thinking like that, and in those times, definitely that's something that you would be considered crazy for. She had to have been starting to slip down that slippery slope.
Yeah, she had all that going on. She was pretty much by herself. I mean, it's you really. I mean, if you focus on that, I mean, it's really a terrible end for the character, because I mean, she hasn't seen her husband in a while. He's been off with David Warner, trying to investigate and track down the priest and that originally gave him the baby to kind of confirm some of the stuff that Father Brennan told him, and she just kind of been cooped. And I mean, there wasn't, you didn't have any of the devices or anything to pacify yourself, even if, I mean, not that really helps that much when you're in hospital, because hospital time is hell time, basically, if you've ever been in one.
Yeah.
It's just slow and it doesn't seem to ever go anywhere. But I mean, you think about back in those days, I mean, probably had like 3 or 4 channels on the TV and just kind of sitting there by herself. And I don't care if she was like a politician's wife, she still would, I mean, it wouldn't have been that great to have been in her situation.
Yeah. No streaming The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina for her.
No getting to see how the last season did or did not live up to her expectations.
Oh my God, she probably would have jumped out the window.
That's probably what caused it, honestly. When Baylock was sending those creepy vibes, that she was just shooting in the last season of Chaos into her mind, and she was like, shit, I'm done with this world. See ya.
Yeah. Laylock shows up and like she's already out the window and she's like, okay.
Let's see. There's those scenes. The decapitation scene is the other big standout in this movie, and we can't get by without saying it because it both ties into the curse and it's one of the bigger special effects in the movie. It's kind of weird because like Gregory Peck really sells it whenever he hears that his wife has died, and you really feel the pain in him, and he swears up and down he's like I want Damien dead too, like he's just done with it after his wife's been killed.
Yeah.
He's lost his second child. But he meets with Bugenhagen, and of course Bugenhagen gives him all these, which is, that name makes me laugh. I'm sorry, but anyways, he meets with him, and he's supposed to be this exorcist, kind of tying into some of that stuff, and he basically tells him, he's like, you got to kill the child on hollow ground, and he gives all the lore on how to defeat Damien.
Hollowed ground. I told you.
Exactly.
They were not oblivious to it, which makes this movie even more makes me angry.
Well, and they mentioned
can't even word right now.
You even brought it up whenever when he tries to go to the church, he freaks out. He can't enter the church or it causes him some kind of pain or something. So it's that whole thing.
I mean, maybe it had to do, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to recant a little bit. Maybe it had to do with him being marked because he had, the 666 on him. I mean, they had that did they have that as the mark of the beast or mark of death? I'm not sure.
They had his mark of the beast, but he had served his purpose, so he'd already sold his soul basically, or was born without one, or whatever you want to argue. I mean,
maybe that's why he couldn't manipulate a blessed object. Maybe that's why he couldn't open the doors.
Maybe so. I mean, but he held the crosses though. I mean, and he had been in the church prior. I don't know. Maybe the only thing I can think of is that it's just that, that was locked out to him. I mean, if he'd been an actual man of the cloth in the sense that he'd been, pure and all that, maybe he would have been able to overcome that. But because he was already marked and everything else, it was, if Satan wanted to, snap his fingers and, the door stayed locked, it stayed locked, at least to him.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that's like meta narrative. That's us adding
exactly.
That's
us getting real deep into this.
But when it comes to the decapitation scene, we get through all those scenes with Bugenhagen, and then and Gregory Peck's character has this crisis of faith. He's like, I don't want to kill a child. Why is he asking me to kill a child? And he throws the knives that's been given to him. There are these ancient knives that, they're supposedly the only thing that can kill Damien. And he throws them, and then, of course, David Warner's like, what the hell are you doing? Have you lost all you were still out to kill the Antichrist? Have you forgot this? And so, he goes over there, and, of course, that lives out his final, little bit that was foreshadowed earlier in his picture, because you got this truck that's, that goes out of brake, comes down through there. It's got the big slabs of glass on it, and then one of them sheets of the glass comes off, and it cuts right through his head, with this scene where the head's like flipping, doing this backspin or whatever as it's like coming off the body. It's a pretty pretty good effect for the time. I mean, you can
definitely
tell, but I mean it works. Kind of funny, they had to go through like several variations to get it to work, because originally they were going to have the sheet of glass fall on him like it, like the steeple did on Father Brennan, but they never could get the glass to work right, because even if they had everything in the world to guide it down, the glass itself wanted to bend and flex, so it wouldn't get in the angle they needed to do it. So they're like, we can't do it vertically, so we have to do it horizontally. So that's why they added the truck, making it part of it, because that's the only way they could get the effect to work. The other thing about it is too, that prosthetic was apparently so realistic that David Warner did not want to have anything to do with it. If they brought it around him, he would leave the room. It was like, he said it was just too real. He couldn't stand to be around it.
Oh, so he wasn't like
No, he didn't do that. He didn't have it sitting in the chair beside of him, while he was getting his makeup put on or anything like that. He didn't want to have anything to do with it at all.
Chicken shit.
And let's see. The next scene that stands out for me in a bad way is, and this is why we're going back to Billy Whitelaw and her casting. When Thorne comes back and he's trying, and he does the clip. He wants to prove that before he stabs Damon or tries to kill Damon, that all this is real. So he gets the clippers out and he finds a 666 on the scalp, which is where Bugenhagen said it'd probably be at. That's whenever Billy Whitelaw's character, Mrs. Baylock, just jumps on his back. I couldn't get into any of those scenes. She was just so like overacting in those scenes. And I mean, Gregory Peck's selling his stuff. It's not, the scene is kind of goofy in a sense because you got this woman trying to overpower this big guy like, that he is. But like her overacting to me versus like, him naturally, frustrate, his frustration that he's got in his face and him trying to fight her off. They're so at odds with each other. I could not get into those scenes whatsoever. How'd you feel about them?
Okay, if we're being honest, like watching it felt like he was tossing a doll around a little bit, and because she's so skinny compared to him, in my opinion. And I'm watching this, and it looked weird. It looked really unnatural. So that's why I thought about the whole doll thing. I know it wasn't a doll. I know that really was her throwing herself at him. I'm with you. I couldn't get into it. It came off very Kmart, generic, and cheap to me.
Well, and there's a scene too when he throws her off and she slams up against the wall and she does this like overacting, like, we were talking about, just kind of, she slides down the wall. Now we talked about Father Brennan and that cut stands out, that whenever he just like slumps over is 1,000 times better than her little, she slides down the wall. I mean, it's so fake and unnatural looking that she's like, okay, fine. I mean, they sell it a little bit later whenever she gets back up with him and she tries to attack him with the knives from the kitchen. That's more realistic. Mm-hmm. She's got an item that can actually hurt him. But I never believed once her little small frame could do anything to Gregory Peck's character. I mean, I just didn't believe it. She can bite and scratch all day, but I mean, just like he did in the movie, he's going to throw her off and he's going to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. The Hubs actually said the same thing. He's actually said the same thing about when we were watching The House of the Devil, this little girl taking on, all these people in this house that were supposed to be prepared for this. When you have a smaller actress like that, and she really was tiny, and so Mrs. Baylock, it's hard to sell it.
Well, I'll give Jocelyn Donahue a little bit of credit in her scenes. They did at least give her a knife. Now, whenever she went straight for the eyes. Whenever it came to, the bearded stranger.
She made it way more realistic.
Yeah, I mean, so she went with what would actually accomplish something. I mean, if you watch Baylock in this movie, she's biting at his face. She's clawing at, parts of him that are exposed. I mean, yeah, that's going to hurt him a little bit, but that's not going to put him down. And I mean, you can take a look at Gregory Peck and tell that, I mean, the guy's stout enough that, that's just like, whatever, get off of me. I got things I got to do. I got to get rid of this Antichrist,
I blame the director.
I do have to say that's a failing on Donner's part, and the overacting is on him too, because they could have reined in Baylock. I mean, she just wits. I mean, you look at her face; she's just like so overacting. She's got the crazy eyes, and it's not the mesmerizing. Those are fine. I mean, they the mesmerizing eyes are what they are, but these are the crazy eyes. It's like like the she witch or something from Army of Darkness. I don't know that scene where it hops on Bruce Campbell's back, and it's that. But that was played for laughs. This wasn't meant to be. And
this wasn't exactly.
And of course, the final scene, we can't get by without the little scene where Damien's standing there. He's still alive. There's the two caskets that are, the show that Mr. and Mrs. Thorne are being buried together, and little Damien looking at the camera straight on with first kind of like a mischievous looking look, and then he kind of smiles or whatever at the camera, and that's how the movie ends, kind of setting it up that he's going to become the ultimate evil. I thought it was a good way to end the movie. For
I
what
hate
it
that
was.
kid's smug little fucking face. I want to slap that little shit. I swear. Which is good. That is not me talking shit about the movie. That is a compliment, because that is how you wanted to feel about this kid. He is literally the son of the devil. You're not supposed to be rooting for him.
He reminded me of the guitar player from AC/DC. I couldn't help it.
Oh!
With his,
yes.
With his little English boy outfit that he had, like I was like, there we go. Let's start playing, a little bit of AC/DC here in the background. Who made who?
Oh my God.
Um, a little, just go into some behind the scenes here that just that didn't get brought up. The rest of it, the David Seltzer set the movies primarily in Europe because, and this is brilliant. I got to give the guy credit. I think Adam Sandler must have took this guy's cue, and that's because that's what he does. But he always wrote the film in a place he had on his bucket list because he knew that whenever they made
nice.
it there, he got to go visit. So he's like, I've never been to Europe. We'll set it in Europe, and he got a free trip out of it. So good on him for it. Adam Sandler, by the way, does that now. He basically gets Netflix to pay him like millions of dollars, and him and all of his buddies get to go to tropical locations. If you watch any of his recent movies, they're all set in some nice place because that's a free trip for him and his buddies to go hang out in. Actually, it's not free. It's him getting paid to go do it, so it's even better.
Well, yeah. I don't know. He was in a movie recently I was watching where he plays, oh, God, he's like a jewelry dealer. It was a serious film. It wasn't a comedy by any means. And I want to say he was.
I heard that was the one film where he's actually tried acting in the last 20 years. You know, like all the other movies, he kind of just phoned it in. And that one you're talking about, he actually gave it's like they legit said that a little bit of the old Adam Sandler came out for that one. You know,
yeah, not a horror film, but it's definitely a movie worth watching.
They had to hire American actors though because the movie was being produced by a American company, Fox Entertainment. So that's the reason they ended up with the American leads, Lee Remick and Gregory Peck. And again, Seltzer actually he worked on the script for 3 months just doing research before he even set any kind of words on the page. He researched 3 months because he wasn't religious, but he got like deeply into it whenever he was like researching. He just thought that a lot of the stuff was so interesting, and
he didn't do too terrible. He had some legit things in there to keep in mind. Like I said, the hollowed ground.
Need
a little La Llorona lore in there.
Yeah, he needed some of that for sure. He used the name of a British Parliament member, Jeremy Thorpe, as the basis for his lead character's name. That's where Thorpe became Thorn, so he just changed that a few letters, and that's where he came from. He likes to note that the film was actually better than his script by a long shot, and he said he puts that solely on the backs of the actors and actresses because he said that if you read his script it was fine, but he said they punched it up and made it believable enough to where they sold it, whereas it wasn't that good as written. And again, he was the one that added in the scene about the agency. I can't imagine that scene though otherwise. I mean, you literally have Mrs. Baylock walking in, I'm going to be the new nanny, and they're just like, okay, and they shrug and they walk off, and then she goes and plays with Damien. Like, legit, that would have been so stupid if that's how that would have
I'm
went
going to
about.
follow up on your references. She's like, okay. I remember the second time too when the, not the nanny, but there was another caretaker of the home that he was like, where's she at? And she's like, oh, she left an address with her, with her forwarding, or she left a forwarding address for her final check. I have no idea.
That's when the other one left, supposedly.
Yeah, and then he's like, okay, well, I'm going to follow up on this one. And she was like, mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. She knows you're full of shit.
It's like, go keep researching the Antichrist, and I'll keep raising, little Lucifer here, They originally pitched the movie to Warner Brothers, but they were in the middle of making The Exorcist 2, and they were like, we don't really care if we've got another one of these things going on, so they lowballed them so much that Donner and Bernard had to shop it elsewhere, and that's why Fox took it up.
Okay.
Fox actually wanted them to really, really go balls out with this thing. They wanted them to put it. There was a bunch of scenes apparently with gargoyles attacking and covens, being all throughout the film. And Donner was like, no, I want this. His mantra was focus on realism. So he
yes, I saw that. I read that. He was like, if it cannot happen in real life, I don't want to, I don't want it to be a thing.
Yeah, and he even, that's why they got the dogs or whatever. He's like, what's a creature that's got a little bit of menace to it, that's believable? We'll add some dogs into the film. It's like he wanted it all to be grounded enough to where somebody could watch it and be like, that could happen, or at least
exactly.
some, and I can't blame him for that, because you imagine this movie with a bunch of, horrible looking gargoyles, because it would have been for the time. I mean, just attacking.
Exactly.
It would have been a complete disaster.
It would have been metal as fuck, though.
It would have been something that Ronnie James Dio would have probably been putting on one of his covers for his songs. A little bit of trivia: Harvey Stevens was actually a blonde kid, but
Oh shit! Oh yeah.
Donner was like, slap some. He literally says this in the behind the scenes like video. He's like, I don't know, slap some shoe polish on him, you know. So they just
that's what they did back in the day.
Yeah, so they put some shoe polish in his hair because it was easy to remove apparently, and they just because he wanted him to have dark hair, so it was like a dark image. We already went over how Gregory Peck was the linchpin for the film. I mean, you can tell me how you feel, but he was legit the best thing in the movie outside David Warner, in my opinion. I mean, like that, you know, his acting, because he's the one that it follows. It's not Damien's film. It's his film. If he had not been such a good, you know, actor, I don't think he could have sold half this movie.
The way that I describe Gregory Peck in this movie is that he is the film. That's the best way to describe it, because literally it is about him. It's following him. It's going through his turmoil and how he's viewing his wife's turmoil and how he's dealing with his kid in general. So, he literally carried this film on his back.
And like we mentioned earlier, the only reason that the rest of them, you know, agreed to come on board was because they heard it's like, oh, Atticus Finch is doing this, you know, sign me up. You know, it has to be pretty damn good. We, let's see. Donner also agreed that it was the high caliber of the actors and actresses that sold the horror in the film. They had a comment on this too that I thought was interesting, especially considering what we've talked about how the editor was talking about how you had the editing is a real tricky thing for horror films, and it was something that I didn't really think about until he mentioned it, but it's true. He says it's a real fine balance, and he said the editor makes more of the movie than what you would think, because if they linger on shots for too long, they lose their punch. But if they cut too quick, it goes into comedy territory. So you got to leave it on there just enough to kind of, you know, like for people to get the point, you know, and to kind of, you know, edge the terror, you know, like tease the terror out of it. But you can't, like, you know, if you do a quick cut, then it's kind of goofy. And if you do, which, you know, goes back to the Father Brennan scene a little bit. But if you know, sit there and you just kind of, you know, going back to the House of the Devil, and you sit there and you kind of linger on stuff for too long, it takes all the tension out of it. So I thought that was a pretty cool little, you know, thing that they brought up during the behind the scenes on this. Let's see. We already discussed all that. All of that. They originally filmed the ending the film had originally was that they showed 3 coffins, hinting that Damien also died in that confrontation at the end of the film. But the studio president actually watched it, and he's like, he was the one that came up with the suggestion. He's like, hey, how about you add that, you know, have the kid live? And Donner was like, you know what, that's not a bad idea. Let's do that. So originally this movie...
Yeah, I think it adds to the creep factor.
Yeah, and that whole scene where he has him, like, smile at the camera, it's kind of funny whenever you hear them talk about it, because, I mean, you hear 2 or 3 different stories about how he got him to do it. Donner says it's basically because he was sitting there telling the kid not to laugh, you know, and of course the kid's going to do, you know, if you tell them not to laugh, they're going to laugh.
Oh, absolutely.
But then, like, I think David Seltzer or one of the others said that they were there, and they said actually what happened was that he not only was he telling him not to laugh, but he was also saying, looks like you passed gas there, Harvey, or, you know, like throwing all this stuff out there, you know, like, you know, that a kid would find funny just to get him to smile at the camera. So
yeah,
that was, I thought, kind of funny. The last little thing I remember about this is that David Seltzer, the writer, was actually kicked off of the movie before he got to see the final part of it, because he played a joke that everybody freaked out so much about that they kicked him out of the film. And he actually, one of the actors, I can't remember which one it was, thought that he had left the film, and he was mad at him, and it was because they just wouldn't let him back on the set. And what it was is that he had went up, and you can imagine how this played out. That scene where they had the coffins there. He walked up whenever they had them sitting there, and he knocked on one of them, and he leaned over, and he really loudly, he was like, "It's okay, Mr. Peck. You know, you can have your tea in just a minute, just a couple more minutes, and we'll be done." And like they literally freaked out because they thought Gregory Peck was inside the coffin, trapped.
Oh my God.
They stopped production of the film. Like, everybody was freaking out that was around there. Of course, it wasn't the case, and they got so mad at him that they just kicked him off the set for him doing that. So I thought
oh my God.
So, but as far as the budget for the film, it was made for a paltry $2.5 million, which is not a lot of money at all. I mean, you know, And actually, $25,000 of that was paid directly to Jerry Goldsmith for the score, and
Nice.
they got that because they actually got that added because when they went back to Fox, it's like, hey, Jerry Goldsmith said he would do something for this, and he was well known, so they was like, he said he would do this, but he had to have 25,000. They were like, well, if he'll do it, then yeah, sure. So they actually got that added on just for that thing, and it won an Academy Award. So it was the great call overall, and of course, Ave Satani is makes this film as far as like memorable. It went on to make $60.9 million, or at least it has thus far. So, I mean, that's a pretty good turnaround for a movie that,
Yeah.
that Warner Brothers was like, oh, well, it looks like a ripoff of one of the movies we did, so I don't think we're going to do it. Now, there is a curse with this movie, or a blessing, depending upon how you look at it. And actually, all of the actors, all the people that were involved in production, minus one, which we'll get into in a second, would viewed this movie as actually a blessing instead of a curse. They said there was a story about how both Gregory Peck and another producer, not Bernard, but another one, were on their way to the set, and they were flying in a plane, and both of their planes got struck by lightning on the way to Europe, which is weird.
Oh my God. Yes,
There was
I read that.
There was another person on set, I think it's Bernard this time, was actually almost struck by lightning during the filming of the film. So that played into it. They were getting ready to get some aerial shots, so they loaded everybody on this plane to get these aerial shots with an airline. Something happened. They got all the people off of the plane and then put regular passengers on it instead. That plane crashed actually before it even had time to really take off. And according to what they said on the Cursed Films on Shudder, that the pilot, and this is terrible, the pilot of that plane that crashed, everybody apparently died in that plane crash. So all the crew that was on that just narrowly escaped with their lives because they were put on a different one right before all this happened. But the pilot, when he crashed, he also crashed into the car that had his child and his wife inside of it, and he killed them as well.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
I mean, just awful. And they said it was something about there was birds on the runway, and that's what led to it. I mean, it's I don't know. It's one of those things. It's it happened. There was they said that there was Gregory Peck and that same producer that were both flying whenever their planes were struck were actually set to go and have eat together at like this little cafe around the corner, and right before that they were getting set to go over there to eat, the place got bombed by the Irish Republican Army and was completely destroyed. So they narrowly escaped getting blown up.
Yeah.
The scene with the baboons, they had a zookeeper on set whenever all that stuff was being filmed. When they went to leave for the day, he said that he was walking out with them. He got a call that there was something wrong with the lion's den, so he told them he would check in with them later. He went back on his own to check this out. Apparently, upon investigating the lion's den, he somehow fell inside of it, and it was mauled to death by the lions. And
Oh shit.
and
Jesus.
yeah, and the most damning one, and this is the creepiest one. The guy
God.
who's
It gets creepier.
Yeah, it gets creepier. Well, I'll throw this in there before we get to the creepy one. Apparently, one of the guys who was a stuntman on this movie, not the one I don't think that got bit, but another stuntman, he went on to another film called A Bridge Too Far. And during one of the scenes in that film, this is right after he did this movie, he was in a Bridge Too Far. He was supposed to have done some kind of scene where he fell off a building or something like that. Well, apparently he really fell and died from it. So that happened right after the film. But this is the creepiest part. One of the guys who was the production worker who was over the special effects on that scene in particular where David Warner's character gets his head cut off with the glass was also working on A Bridge Too Far. Him and his wife were traveling, and I want it's in some kind of Scandinavian country, I believe. But they were traveling together while they were filming, helping on A Bridge Too Far as well. And which sounds to me like that movie was cursed more than maybe The Omen, but we'll get into that in a second. And anyways, he was traveling back with his wife. They had a car accident right outside, before I get to that, they had a car accident. the wife was decapitated by the
Fucking
windshield, by the windshield of the
fuck?
car. And when he got out of it barely, and when he looked up, he saw that he was at a mile marker that said Omen, OMMEN, 66.6 kilometers.
Oh, fuck no.
Now, there's some debate on that last part. They said that there was a sign there, but it technically said 66.0, so he could have been, suffering the effects of the accident and thought he saw another 6, but regardless, Omen, 66. I mean, that's still close enough for me to call it and say that that's, probably the creepiest, thing that could have came out of any of these movies.
I'm so glad I didn't research any of the curses, because you legit just scared the shit out of me, and I have chills right now, and it's the best fucking feeling.
It's when you get to that one about that guy, that's the one that really sends them. It's like you hear the other things, and I gotta agree with the rest of the people on the set. If you look at it from like higher up point of view, they all escaped. They were all tangentially next to people that were, that felt the curse. Like nobody on set,
Exactly.
really felt it. It was the zookeeper that was helping them. It was a place they were going to, feed or eat or film at. It was they actually narrowly escaped all dying on a bunch of crew members died on a plane because they had to swap them off, at last minute. So that's actually, extremely good luck if you want to look at it from the other point of view. They all came close, but they never actually had anything happen to them. It's that
still
last
scary as fuck.
It's that last guy though. You can't say. That's too close. Now, having said that, it's time to give our ratings, and I've got to be honest with you. I was torn on this. It's the cemetery scene that does it, and a little bit of the first scene we talked about with the nanny. That it's all for you, Damien. If it wasn't for those two scenes, this would have been an automatic 1 Casper. I never found anything about this that was, remotely scary to me. Those scenes had enough tension and enough dark vibes going on that it bumped it up narrowly to a 2, which in our rating system is Patrick Swayze or Sam Wheat from Ghost. So for me, it narrowly squeaks in at a 2. I just didn't find the film that scary. Now, I do love aspects of the film. There's things that I hate, but I do like those classic Hammer horror scenes, and I love everything that's in the movie between David Warner and Gregory Peck. So I like the film. I just scary, not so much.
Yeah, I'm going to come right out with the score and then explain why. It is also a 2 for me, a Patrick Swayze, and it would be a 1. Honestly, because this was 3 years after The Exorcist. So when you have a horror film of that caliber, and then you follow up with this, which is, The Omen was always supposed to be a scary movie to somebody like me. Again, it was one of those movies that as a Catholic child, I was not allowed to watch. I was raised to be terrified of this movie. So it really doesn't deliver because of all the buildup that I had. But what brings it up to a 2, because obviously I didn't score it a 1, is they did pretty decent with the lore. Are we there? Are we connected again?
We're back.
I don't know what happened. I literally just saw my phone go, like, you're done. It's like, no, I most certainly am not, okay? I am talking,
Damien.
do not be rude.
I think it's Damien. I think he's
Damien,
patched in.
he's like, I'm better than a 2, is what he's thinking. No, what brought it up from a 1 to a 2 was the fact that they did pretty decent with the lore for the times. Because back then, nobody really had, they couldn't Google Lori shit like we could, They didn't have Supernatural to kind of plant the seeds of lore in your head. Nothing like that. There was books, but were people really reading them, or did they think it was part of the occult? So I think they did pretty good with that. The scenes that you mentioned, the nanny, the decapitation. I cannot word right now. The decapitation scene, and as well as the cemetery scene, I think they did pretty good with those. I would have liked to seen some more creepier vibes from the kid. Like there was a scene where the dog was in the room, but the dad goes to check on him, And the dog wasn't creepy enough to do it on its own, but the kid was sleeping. If they had just had that kid turn his face and have this creepy look on his face, or maybe some makeup effects, man, it could have just added so much more to this film. So,
Well,
yeah, I'm gonna.
That was the funny thing about Little Evil. They actually went the opposite way as opposed to, I mean, they had Damien being, the innocent villain, as it were. But like in Little Evil, there's a scene where Adam Scott walks up to him, and apparently Damien or Lucas in that film will only talk to him using this creepy little hand puppet. And of course, it has a demonic voice, so it's like, "What do you want?" It's like that sort of stuff. Even though it's played for comedy, and that would have probably, would have been lent more like scary factor to Damien if he had something going on. I mean, it's just when you hear him like cry out at the end of the movie. I didn't bring this up, but I mean, when you hear him cry out, it's like, "No, Daddy, no!" Like I felt sorry for the kid. I actually felt bad for him.
Yeah, that innocent vibe.
Yeah.
It was the human in him coming out. Yeah, it's just hard. I mean, because it's not a terrible, terrible movie, especially for its time, but it's following The Exorcist, and I don't remember what I scored The Exorcist if it was a 3 or a 4, but it definitely was not a 1 or a 2.
No, I think you might have scored it a 4 because I think it might have. But I mean, yeah, it was in that range. But I'm right there with you. There's only a couple of scenes, and they just edge into that territory. It's good for the lore. It's good for the scenes. I mean, that's in it. But I mean, as far as being scary, nope. I wouldn't. There wasn't no scene for me like the mysterious bearded stranger that suddenly pops up out of nowhere and lights Meg's cigarette. Like in House of the Devil. There wasn't anything that made me jump out of my skin like that.
Yeah, nothing like that, and it was unfortunate. So
what kind of plugs do you have for the network?
Well, before I start plugging, I want to know what are we doing next? Please tell me it's Needful Things.
It can be Needful Things if that's what you want to do. I thought about
Were we following something?
Well, I thought about rounding out the Devil's Child part of this by just doing the Devil's Advocate. That's what it was. The Devil's Advocate.
Okay. No, I'm down for the Devil's Advocate. I like that.
Yeah, I figured we would round it out by that because, I mean, spoiler alert, that's kind of what it's about. So I figured we would follow the, exploits of the Antichrist going, into adulthood, as it were, and then kind of tie a bow on that, and we could move forward and maybe mix it up for an episode and kind of do some humorous films. I know you had, in particular, were looking forward to rewatching Repossessed, and I definitely want to revisit Stay Tuned because that's one of my little guilty pleasures, I guess it were, in the horror comedy.
Definitely. So yes, The Devil's Advocate for sure. The next film, I'm going to, in terms of plugs and getting us out of this show, I'm going to release The House of the Devil first, as we recorded it, and then I will be releasing this one, The Omen, and then going from there, Blue Collar BS. I mean, we got the studio, I would say 98% done. We're literally just waiting for, I know the hubby wants to do video, so we're waiting for the switcher board for that. But other than that, we could start recording shows because we're literally just waiting for some paintings to put up on the wall. Hot Mess Express, I'm ready to get the Ho train back into gear. So we'll be starting, probably be starting that next week, which was literally the last week of March for anyone that's paying attention, if you are paying attention. And that's really about it. Again, no set schedule. And thank you again to Death Holler for keeping Blue Collar BS going. While everybody's looking for podcasts on the network, we've literally been getting excellent traction. So for everyone listening, thank you. Seriously.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And with that,
I mean,
go ahead.
I fucked that up. No, I'm done.
Okay. And with that, peace be with you.
And with your spirit.
Oh, I think you should keep that last part in.
I'm going to.
Thank you for listening to our third and final episode of The Omen. If you liked this episode, please look forward to our next episode where we review The Devil's Advocate. Death Holler is brought to you by Blue Collar BS with your hosts, the Reverend Dr. Death and Laia Arena. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share. We'll catch you next time. And don't forget to bring your death certificate.